Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share our recent conversation with Alessio Mencarelli. Alessio is a second-year student in our part-time MBA class of 2026, and he and I recently connected to talk more about his background, his decision to pursue an MBA, what led him to Darden and the part-time MBA program, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. As always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the ExecMBA podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Alessio Mencarelli. Alessio, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Brett. Thank you for having me.
It's great to talk with you. How's everything going?
It's going really well. It's Halloween season, which is something I didn't grow up with abroad. So it's really fun to kind of walk around DC and look at all the houses, and it's just something different. So I'm really enjoying it. How's everything for you?
I'm thinking about Halloween. It has its origins in a Celtic harvest festival. Probably wasn't that big of a deal in Italy, I think.
No, not that big of a deal at all, actually. But it's definitely a welcome change.
All right. Everything's going well here. We're in the midst of the kind of early part of our admission season. We just had our first part-time MBA deadline, October 1, and just released decisions for folks who applied to that round. We're working through our executive MBA deadlines, September 10, October 10, November 10's on the horizon here. So yeah, a lot happening always. We're always recruiting. So that's a great thing. You're always meeting new people, always helping people figure out is Darden maybe the place where they'd like to be for their MBA. So and it's always fun to reconnect with folks who you remember from that process. So Alessio, great to have you here on the podcast. I cannot believe here you are, second year of the program, right?
It is the second year of the program, yes.
How quickly the time flies.
Parts of it have flown by, parts of it have not, but yes, it's the second year.
Well, before we get too far along, tell us a little bit more about who you are and your background.
Yeah, so I grew up in Italy, actually. I grew up in Chianti outside of Florence. It's about 30 minutes outside of Florence. I spent my first 10 years of my life there, and then I relocated to Rome. I spent about 6 years of my life in Rome. It was a very different place to grow up in than probably a lot of other people have grown up in that have not grown up in Italy. But it gave me the opportunity to learn Italian. My father was kind of working between Paris and Rome at the time, so it also gave me the opportunity to learn French because they sent me to a French school. And then I moved to the United States because I wanted to focus on my US education and kind of learning English and ironing out some of the vocabulary issues that I had been having in school and stuff. And so that led me to the University of Maine. We had been going to Maine and the East Coast since I was pretty much 1 year old, just to kind of give me some exposure to English, going to camps and stuff up there. And so I decided to go to school up there just because it was something familiar. And it was definitely a welcome and different change, which allowed me to kind of focus on my English. And then I ended up working for Merrill Lynch first in their global wealth management division for a little bit over the course of my sophomore year. I then looked at other internships and I ended up at Nestle, where I still currently am. I worked in Arkansas, which is probably another completely different universe from what I grew up in. I ended up in Bentonville, Arkansas, which is actually the headquarters for Walmart, which is the largest customer for Nestle. And that's why I was sent there. Then at the successful completion of that, they offered me a position in one of their management rotation programs, which is in the sales side of it. And so they asked me to lead a team in Atlanta, Georgia, upon my completion of my senior year, which was another big change from, Arkansas, Maine. Prior to that, Scottsdale for the internship. Then prior to that, I had worked in a factory actually in El Paso, Texas as my first job in America. Then prior to that, I lived in Maine and then Italy. So I've definitely had a few changes. So I ended up in Atlanta where I was managing a team of older gentlemen. They tended to be between 55 and 65. And I graduated. I was actually quite young. I was 21. And so as you can imagine, there's definitely some difficulty in managing some older folks. I was actually the one who trained them. So there was a kind of an immediate respect there, which definitely helped with the situation. And then COVID hit and they were like, you can work remotely and you've been promoted. And so you're welcome to live and work from anywhere. So I decided to move somewhere where it was a little bit sunnier with a little bit of a beach. So I moved to Miami. which was a complete change as well. So I lived there for about a year, and then I decided it was time to move to DC, where the global headquarters are. Well, not global, but the North American headquarters are for Nestle. And so that's how I ended up in Northern Virginia.
Wow, lots of twists and turns, different geographies in that story. I remember your interview. I don't remember getting this level of detail in the in the interview. I've learned some new things already, Alessio. So Nestle's right across the street from us here at San Family Grounds, 1100 Wilson Boulevard. We can see the Nestle building from our space. How did you get interested in pursuing an MBA?
Actually, I was always interested in pursuing an MBA since my senior year of college. I was one of the honor scholars at school. I really like economics and kind of looking at the big picture and how to connect the different dots across different pictures. Um, and I thought an MBA could help me bridge even more into that learning. I knew I wanted to do an MBA. I just didn't know when to fit it in kind of everything that I was currently doing. And then when I moved to DC, I found out that Darden was an option. So I decided to apply, and luckily I got in, and here we are.
Yeah, obviously, when you think about doing an MBA and you were considering different paths to an MBA, how did you decide that you wanted to work while pursuing your MBA rather than say take 2 years off and do more of a full-time MBA program?
So yeah, I had just gotten promoted into a new role that I was really, really excited for because it's kind of an interesting role because you're able to do A to Z. So it's from production to distribution, and it's on the export side of the Nestle business. So it's something I wouldn't necessarily have been able to do if I had finished school. So it was definitely an experience that I wanted to have, but I also felt like it was the right time in my life to do an MBA. And so I was like, why not do both at the same time? And I wouldn't have to sacrifice either opportunity.
We hear that from a lot of students. They just don't want to lose the career momentum. They like what they're doing. They don't feel like they have to take the 2 years off. They can still get the same degree, just through a different path. What is it about Darden that appealed to you?
Well, first of all, the case method, the fact that I'm able to solve real life issues, the faculty, the fact that the faculty is the same exact faculty as there is on grounds, um, the fact that the classes are relatively small that you sit on, but they're very diverse in regards to who is going to them. So I'm able to kind of take knowledge from a little bit of everyone from different angles was definitely a big benefit towards me to me.
Yeah, what have you learned about your classmates? I mean, one of the things that's true in the case methods that you get to hear their experiences and perspectives. It all comes into the class discussion. What have you learned about your classmates? What's been surprising to you about your classmates?
I've had the opportunity to learn a lot about completely different businesses that have had literally no exposure to, for example, tech or healthcare. Coming from CPG, they may have very different types of business lenses. And so being able to listen to them and gain some insight on how those business operate, I found very beneficial and something that I definitely brought back to Nestle as well.
Yeah, I'm curious. One of the things that we hear from part-time students and on a pretty regular basis, also executive MBA students on a pretty regular basis, is that they're able to take what they're learning in class and apply it immediately at work. Has that been your experience? Is that something that you've been able to do?
Yes, definitely. There have been classes where I may not have been excited by the title as much as I maybe should have been. But then when you get into class, you realize how interesting the lens that the professors might be able to take to it. For example, even accounting. Um, and we do work a lot with P&Ls. And so having that exposure and being able to bring that into the workplace from the classroom is extremely beneficial.
So you're a year into the program at this point, maybe even a little bit more than that. If I give you full credit for this being in late October, how does it feel at this point? You're still in the core for folks who are just learning about our program. The core curriculum in the part-time MBA program is the first 18 months. So Alessio's got a couple more quarters here before he'll be finished with the core curriculum. And then after that point, he'll start taking electives. How does it feel? Do you feel like you got a good handle on how things work?
It feels good. It obviously takes some time to get a handle on it just because, work-life balance, school. I'm currently in economics too and decision analysis too. So that's a lot of twos there at the end. But they're definitely very interesting courses, and I'm definitely very happy that I got all the way here.
Yeah, for folks who are, again, just learning about our program, In the core curriculum, most courses are divided into part one and part two. So there was a decision analysis one that students take actually pretty early in the core curriculum. There's also a global economies and markets. GEM is the shortened version of that title. There's a GEM one, and again, students take that pretty early in the program. So revisiting those topics here in the second half of the course. You feel like the subject matter is easier now that you're kind of in the second half? I mean, obviously it's different stuff, but do you feel like you now with that base under you, having done the first part of the courses, does it feel more accessible? Does it feel more comfortable? Curious about that.
I always felt like as long as you did the readings, and paid attention and worked on the problems, I never felt like it was inaccessible. And it's something that interests me personally. So if it's something that interests you as a person, they are real life scenarios. So it's definitely something that it's really fun to dive into and look at. Um, and especially when you have a learning team, which is something that is given to you through Darden, you're able to kind of analyze the problems in a group, and it gives you the opportunity to see certain things that you may not have noticed with a team. So
Yeah, how have you worked with your learning team? Every learning team approaches its work a little bit differently. So how does your team work together?
well, I've been very, very fortunate. My learning team is amazing. We meet every Sunday to review the cases. We usually review both classes at the same time. So we have to do the pre-work before meeting with the learning team. And we started off really strong down in Charlottesville, down in R1, and ever since we've just kept at it, and it's really worked well. Some people are a little bit more analytical, some people are not, and so we just kind of help each other out where maybe some of us have an opportunity.
Yeah, for folks who are newer to our part-time program, the way the program is structured, at least in the core where Alessio is you have class on Monday and Thursday evenings. The weeks alternate between in-person one week, the following week you'd be online, the week after that in person, the week after that online, so on and so forth. Monday is all one course, and Thursday is all one course. So when Alessio says they have to have all the readings ready, if they're going to talk about both courses they're taking in that quarter for those classes, that means that they have to have probably about four cases in most situations prepared by that learning team meeting. Because in general, Darden math is you have for one class, you're going to have one case. So probably have about four cases to prepare.
Yes. And there's usually some additional materials, especially if they're quantitative classes, just to give you a grasp of the general concept. And then it's about applying those general concepts into the class, which is really interesting. And then usually the professor shows you how it can be used in the real world or how he would have thought of the problem. So it's often really interesting. It's like the end of the class is actually when he kind of shows you how he would have done it. So
Interesting. So you mentioned that there were some classes that you were maybe more excited about than others. But obviously, with the core, everybody takes the same classes. Nobody places out of classes. What were some of the classes that you were really, really excited about?
I was really, really excited about finance and learning how to model. And that class did turn out to be very, very interesting. I was also very excited for economics since that was my major in college. I was also interesting to see their take on how they approached economics. So those were probably the main two that I was kind of very excited for.
How does econ compare in graduate business school versus, say, econ as an undergraduate student?
Well, given that the professor does it as a living, also on the side, is much more different than some college professors that I maybe had at University of Maine that didn't necessarily do that. So it's definitely interesting to see how they approach the global economy and the issues that are there. And I usually stop by after class and I'm able to ask them all sorts of different questions. So it's definitely very interesting to pick their brain on how to think through processes and through problems.
Yeah, the faculty member in question here is Ian Kosi, who works at the World Bank as his day job, so to speak, and he teaches here at Darden in the part-time MBA program. He teaches both sections of the economics course. As mentioned, it was global economies and markets. So you're about a year in, Alessio. What's been your favorite thing about the part-time program thus far?
My favorite thing so far. has definitely been R1, and I'm very much excited for R2. Um, we're a very social class, which was always something I was kind of concerned about when I was looking at part-time versus full-time programs because I felt like maybe I would have to sacrifice one for the other. But I feel like we have such a good cohort and that we do see each other after school and on weekends that we are able to make up for that social time that we would maybe have if we were living on campus to some degree. And so I've really gotten to know a lot of my classmates, and I think that's definitely something that has really benefited me throughout the class.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about this because I think for a lot of our part-time MBA students, they're worried about, okay, I'm going to do a working professional program. Will there still be a community there? Will I still have the opportunity to get to know my classmates? And this kind of rich extracurricular experience that people sometimes think of as maybe the domain of the full-time MBA programs of the world. Well, tell us a little bit more about this outside the classroom experience.
Yeah, so I think we became very close at the end of R1 when everybody started to really know each other. I think the school did a very good job at hosting some events in the beginning of R1 and then kind of just scattering them throughout that week. And then furthermore, we're very lucky in the fact that given that we're in person one week and then we're not in person the next week, we're able to have dinner and see each other and speak to one another and get to know each other even more throughout the weeks where we are in person at dinner. And then usually on Thursday evenings, we all go out together for a little bit. There's a restaurant downstairs of Family Grounds that's very convenient for everybody. So we usually all meet there. And then on the weekends, we usually see each other to make it even more, to bond a little more.
Yeah, one of the things that one of our first part-time MBA podcast guests mentioned about the experience as a part-time MBA student here at Darden is really that he and his classmates, and this is a student in our class of 2025, and I'm curious if this resonates with you, Alessio, that they really thought about themselves as residential students in an evening program because 90+% of our part-time MBA students live within 30 miles or less of our location here in Roslyn. So not so difficult to get together with your classmates outside of class.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate in the fact that I actually live 3 blocks away from Family Grounds, and the office is also 3 blocks. So I kind of create the perfect triangle of school, work, and life. So it's very, very ideal for me in that regard. And most of our classmates do live relatively close to the school and to their offices. So yeah, that's definitely a reality.
You're living the fully integrated Roslyn lifestyle with work and job and work and school and life all happening here within a 3 block radius.
Yes, it's very convenient. Yes.
All right. Well, what are you looking forward to in the months ahead? I mean, obviously, you got a little bit more of the core. You've got R2 coming up. What else are you excited about?
Well, I'm definitely excited about the fact that now I have almost completed the core. I'm very excited about R2, but I'm also very excited about the electives that we've been able to choose. Um, Having that opportunity to kind of choose some classes that we may be more interested in rather than others is definitely going to open up some interesting boxes in regards to learning and things that we may have wanted to approach. So that's definitely something I'm very excited about.
Yeah, I want to go back. You mentioned R1 a few times here, and so I'm curious about what is it about R1 that was so special to you? R1 for again for folks who are just learning about the program is residency one. It's the first week-long residency in the part-time MBA program. It takes place down in Charlottesville. Everybody's there. It's the first week of school for part-time MBA students. It also happens to be the first week of school for full-time and executive MBA students. What is it about this week that was so impactful for you?
Well, first of all, I got to meet the entire class, which I thought was very nice. We got to stay on the grounds, so we felt like Darden students. But it was the first week, so you really felt like a part of that community, and you really got integrated into that community. It was really interesting to also meet the full-time students, the executive students during that week. Um, and then you get to meet your learning teams. You get to play a lot of mental games, if we want to call them games, and you get to learn a little bit about each class throughout the week. So you basically sit in on one class of the core each hour is basically a completely different class, which I thought was really, really interesting. And you realize how much you're about to learn, which to me was very exciting.
Is there particular favorite memory from that first week that stands out? I recognize it's probably a little blurry. It's over a year ago. It's a very intense week. There's a lot happening, both curricularly and extracurricularly. But do you have a favorite memory?
Yes, the dinner where we got to speak with the professors on a more personal basis was definitely one of the highlights. So we were all outside. We got to converse with some of the professors, maybe for finance. For example, we got to discuss some topics that we maybe wouldn't have been able to bring up in class during that hour, or we didn't really want to kind of divert the class in a certain direction, but we did get the opportunity to speak with them at the end there. So that would be my favorite memory from that week.
Listening to you talk here, Alessio, it seems like this sort of faculty interaction has been very important to you in your MBA experience. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, I find the faculty very interesting to speak with. They're definitely people that are at the top of their league, if you want to put it that way, in regard to their own fields. And so it's just very interesting to hear them speak about their fields and how they've approached their fields, how they got there in the first place, how they think of problems. Just, yeah, I feel very fortunate to be here.
So one of the questions that we get from prospective part-time MBA students is about what access to faculty looks like in the part-time MBA program, how part-time MBA students can engage with faculty. So maybe a little bit more color on what your experience has been like. It sounds like you obviously followed up with Ian after class, talked with some of the faculty during R1, but what does it look like to engage with faculty to connect with them?
Yeah, so a lot of the faculty will be willing to eat or is eating at family grounds when you first get there. So every 2 weeks you have the opportunity to have dinner with them, which is always very interesting conversations. We usually are able to hang out with him at the end of the class, so ask him any questions that may come up. We're able to message them. They're always readily available to us. And then we started a tradition where we have a drink with the professor at the end of each last class, which is also something everybody really seems to enjoy. And we hope that we get to kind of push this forward to the next class. So, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know about that tradition. How did you decide to start that tradition? Who in your class was the spark for that?
I think me, Greg, and Sarat, who are currently three of the classmates, kind of began the tradition. And so we've just kept it going.
That's excellent. I have no doubt that the Darden faculty were open to that.
We're
They're known
extremely
for,
excited about it. Yes.
yes, no surprise there. So when you think about the impact of the program thus far, again, you're about a year in. What jumps out to you?
I feel like it's had a lot of real life applications for me, especially at work. I mentioned the P&L and the accounting one, accounting two. That's definitely been extremely beneficial to me in my day job. It's given me the opportunity to think of things that I may not have thought about in regards to different jobs and things like that. And kind of maybe I want to go into marketing at Nestle or just different opportunities that may be available throughout the company. And so it's definitely opened up some different thought processes that may have not been there.
Yeah, I was curious. How has your time at Darden influenced maybe your career interests? Have those changed? Have they been pretty much the same?
They've been pretty much the same. Yeah, I would say they've stayed pretty similar to what they did when I first began.
And so if you were to describe sort of the part-time MBA program at Darden to a prospective student, what would you highlight for them? What would you want them to know about it?
I would want them to know about the work-life balance in regards to school and work. It definitely takes a little bit of getting used to. And I personally thought I had more free time than I actually did. And so when I first started the program, I really had to adjust certain things. But other than that, just be prepared to learn a lot. There's no class where you're going to go into, even if that is your subject matter from university, where you're not going to learn a tremendous amount of things. So those would probably be the main ones that I would want them to take away from this.
Well, there's a solid contingent of folks at Nestle who've done either our executive MBA or part-time MBA program, not to mention full-time MBA alumni or two around there. Have you been able to connect with the other folks at Nestle?
Yes, we actually host lunches, Nestle Darden lunches, with fellow like students that are currently here, and then people that have graduated from Darden. So we found those also extremely beneficial just to kind of build out the network, and continue to build the Darden network in Nestle.
Yeah. Any agenda for those lunches, or it's just getting to know folks?
It's just get to know each other. What do you do? How do you do it? What was your experience at Darden? A little bit of everything.
Like it. Well, any final words of advice for our prospective student listeners here, Alessio? Anything you would
Yeah,
encourage them to think about as they
yeah,
think about their own MBA journeys?
yeah, definitely. I'd say I mean, I'm very close to my family, so definitely be inclusive of your families and your own decisions to go to school. Um, and I would say don't sacrifice the things that you look forward to. Like for me personally, I always like to have things that I look forward to, specifically to travel related. And if I were to sacrifice those, I think I'd feel a lot differently about a lot of different things. So I would definitely make sure to incorporate certain things within your life as you progress through the journey.
Well, are you going to be back in Italy for the holidays? What are you looking forward to here? Speaking of things to look forward to.
I am actually going to be back in Italy, a little bit of skiing actually with my family, so that'll be nice. So yeah.
That sounds very nice. So, and it'll be when you get back, it'll be almost time for R2, the second week-long residency down in Charlottesville. That comes up in March, kind of March, April timeframe, somewhere right around there at the end of quarter nine, or about 18 months into the program. So much to look forward to. Well, Alessio, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's great to talk with you, and excited for you and your classmates here, almost done with the core, just a couple more quarters.
Thank you for having me, Brett. It's been great.
And that was my conversation with Alessio Mencarelli, a second-year student in our part-time MBA class of 2026. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at that's ExecMBA@darden.virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.